Welcome, Sweety Patel, Director of School Counseling Services for the Carteret, New Jersey Public Schools, and the author of Fitting the Pieces Together, Student Services in the Big Picture. It's in the autumn issue of Legacy, Transformation, and Action. It's a wonderful piece. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter, for having me.
It's such an important topic because I think, yeah, after 40 years myself in public ed, there was always this dichotomy of the instructional track and then, the social emotional needs track, the other services that schools. And probably over the years it changed. What we were doing 40 years ago, families had much different needs 10 years ago. And so it's so needed. And I know, having known you for a few years now, what a passionate advocate you are for this, that you not only see the need, but you're a voice. You're speaking up for all those wonderful people that all of us in education know that run student support services. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So talk to us a little about how student support services can fit into the total school program, knowing all the things that schools are trying to accomplish in the course of an academic year.
Absolutely. So, when we think about just school in the US, everyone thinks about, or school anywhere in the world, we usually just think about instruction, right? We're
Right.
thinking about teachers, we're thinking about principals, we're thinking about that. And they are definitely the core, like they're the main part of education that's kind of like standard throughout any system or district or state or country you go to. The thing with support services is that not many people, not all schools have consistency with their different roles, and not everyone assigns significance to those roles. But what you find is that once you have a strong student support system, everything with instruction just gets enhanced. And I think that's like one of our main facets, are one of our main functions in the school system that a lot of people seem to neglect, or not really realize until they actually see it for themselves, in perhaps the teacher seeing it in a student that they have, or an administrator seeing it in a whole population or subpopulation that they have in the school. Or even if oftentimes we impact students and it's not the school that sees it, but it's the community, like parents see the impact, or some individual situation happens and one individual sees the impact. So because it's not a classroom, people don't always think that it's important or it's not a priority. But
Yeah.
once you actually experience that impact yourself, it's like, wait, I can't believe my counselor made a difference. I can't believe this nurse like cared about how I felt, not just what I did, and
Right.
all of those roles matter.
Well, you mentioned it in the beginning of the article that there's kind of a societal myth about the separation of these services from the instructional track. Tell me more about that. How should we think about that? That there's just something wired in society that we naturally assume that they're separate.
Yeah, so that's why I use the puzzle analogy, because
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I hate to say it this way, but it's true. We're kind of like marginalized, right? And like the
Yeah.
center is the teachers, the administrators, and the traditional roles. And they are the largest component. I would never take away from that, because that's why the kids come to school, right? Because they're coming
Right.
to learn. But I think as the world has progressed, as time has progressed, there's different forms of learning. There's other things that are, taking priority as things happen around the world, in terms of, kids needing these social skills, needing coping
Yes.
skills, needing to be able to just handle life, handle crises. And
Yes.
once they do that, they're actually able to receive instruction well. I feel like since the beginning of time, that's probably always existed in some form or fashion. But
Yes.
at this time, it's just so important, and you just see it coming out in so many ways. And some of it is, technology, some of it is, multiple wars and politics,
Mhm.
and, all of these things, the societal things that are happening in people's homes and communities. Like it just seems like, as you know, when you hear people say like, back in the day this never used to happen, I feel like now everything has multiplied, and the need for that support staff is so important. And it's almost like the puzzle piece, the analogy, it's almost like, okay, instructions kind of the middle, everybody wants the middle to be clean and clear, but
Mhm.
we always kind of start with the frame of a puzzle when we do like a jigsaw puzzle,
Yes,
and the frame holds things up. The frame allows you to do the middle, and the
right?
frame really just captures everything. So although we're on the margin and we're not like central, we're still
Yes.
so important, and we have to start kind of integrating ourselves into the whole school model.
Yeah, the puzzle analogy is genius. It's just we've all had that. No matter how astute or challenged we are with the big jigsaw puzzle, for me it's like daunting. It's like, where do I start? And it's true. Once you get the frame, then everything else
Mhm.
slowly starts to come into reference. Um, I think, you were saying things seem to have multiplied. I want to believe that we're just more, as a society, more open to acknowledging everything from neurodivergence to different constellations of families and everything in between. When I was a little guy going to school many years ago, these things just weren't talked about.
Mhm.
It was the family took care of it. Some families didn't want it public. Other families may not have had access to the resources, even if there was an identified challenge. But I'd like to think, and I'd love your opinion on this, that we're just more open today. And the reason why it seems like there's so much more is because we're acknowledging that there's a diversity in life and we're not all the same. Is that
Yes.
true, or am I being pie in the
No,
sky?
actually, I do believe that's true, because I think that everything kind of works in cycles. So I
Yes.
feel like things have existed and perhaps they got like resolved a certain way. Perhaps they even got put under, swept under the rug as,
Hmm.
in certain situations. But I
Yep.
think now people are becoming more open and feeling freer to talk about these things.
Yes.
And because that is being received by so many people, they're more inclined to be able to communicate about it. And it's a good thing. There's
Absolutely.
less repression, I guess, in
Yes.
some way.
Yeah. And repression from the outside, if you're feeling there's something you need to deal with internally in your family unit or in yourself, but also less shame, less sense
Mhm.
of I need to hide it. I can
Right.
ask for help.
Yes.
I think it probably all hit or came to a head with the pandemic because we knew over the years as faculty members, we became more aware of how
Yeah.
to support children and families. But when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, wow, we
Yes.
needed to be there. We needed to up our game. We didn't know what the outcome would be or for how long. And what was that like for you in student support services to suddenly be accommodating students at their homes, but also knowing there are families in crisis, knowing there are things going on that don't stop for a disease?
Right.
What was that like for you? Teachers talk about how crazy it was in the classroom, but I can only imagine for student services.
So I think what it did is it's almost like what you talked about before, like becoming more open, the whole idea of becoming more open. It
Hmm.
brought more out into the open in terms of students' experiences. So for instance, like having a more magnified look at the home life, and
Yes,
understanding what student situations are. It's almost
yes,
like, when a student comes into a school or a classroom, they're there. But when
right,
they have to do it virtually, you can't take away their home environment. So
right,
things started to come into play in terms of what their home life was like physically, if they were on Zoom, but also, attendance wise and schedule wise, with their times of waking up or going to sleep. That whole idea of like often with online courses, we talk about it all the time. Academically, it's students who are self-sufficient and can do it independently are usually more successful with online classes, but those who need that extra support or have some sort of
yes,
specialized plan, they need an actual person there. So when
yes,
we went through the pandemic and we had everything online and we were trying to rely more on students just having the wherewithal to get up and get on a Zoom and do all this work, it
yes.
brought to light like how much more students need the support of actual people, and not virtual support or just someone checking off a box or marking them in. through a
Yes.
screen. So I think it brought to light how important humanity is, right? And how important that
Thank
human
you.
contact is. Like
Yes.
that was definitely something. I think it also brought to light the anxiety students feel because after that, a lot of, school refusal and avoidance, those types of
Hmm.
things started to come out a little bit more because it
Yes.
was a big adjustment. And then I think it was also kind of a reset. Like people were like brought back to like the basics of like, okay, like now what? Like we have to kind of change our whole foundation of how we're doing instruction and schooling, and no one really had any protocols to follow. Everyone was kind of going off each other. So it was definitely like a reset of the
Yes.
system, that some things we almost still should hang on to and some things I kind of feel like we should let go of. Like it explained a lot more of like what our system is and what we need to reflect on.
It's really true. And you mentioned some of the phenomenon we saw. Another thing that came to mind was especially middle school teachers were telling me as kids came back that they felt like the kids, they talk about they lost a year in reading or they lost a year in math. They felt like the kids lost a year in socialization, that they came
Absolutely.
back to classrooms and just didn't know how to handle a lot of,
Interact. Yes.
yeah. Um,
Yes.
how did that come to your office? How,
Yes. So I think definitely the school refusal and avoidance, the increase in anxiety. We have a lot of
hmm
students sometimes that report not wanting to come to school because of anxiety,
hmm
just being fearful or worried, like a lot of things that are very mental health based,
yes,
so that definitely is some ways that I did see it, and I also think it's almost like the whole thing with middle school and high school students and cell phones. It's like
yes,
we're finally kind of getting a handle on the understanding, and then the pandemic hits, right? And then it's like,
right,
okay, well, we need those apps and we need all this, and now we're
right,
trying to get away from it. We're back to like too much screen time. So it's like it was like multiple technological issues, kind of
yes,
coming up. And, student support services, although there are many apps and many things that support our work, I
hmm
would definitely say that
sure,
you do find certain people or certain people in certain roles relying on this technology too much still. And
right,
so they're not interested in speaking to students. For instance, a very simple example is emails. Like a lot of support staff are getting comfortable with emailing. A lot of students are getting comfortable with emailing. And it's like no
right,
longer like back when I was a counselor, the kids didn't even have email addresses. So they would,
right,
make an appointment to come see you or just pop in or just, cut class or whatever and find a way to
yes,
see you because that was the only way they could see you to get their needs met, right? So
right,
now it's like with an email, they can email and get their answer. And
wow,
yes, it's faster, but then it takes away this whole great conversation that could be had.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, and we're feeling that too, that in general, not just with the kids, but even with adults, there just seems to be a tendency, a trend towards if I don't have to be face to face with somebody, if I can do something
yeah,
through an app or a text or an email, that I'll do that. And it's kind of sad because you miss that connection,
right,
that sense of
right.
being in
Yes,
the same room and having an interpersonal experience.
yes. It takes
Interesting.
away from like the tool part of it. Like all of these things are wonderful tools, but then when it becomes the
Yeah,
main thing and only thing you use, it takes away from it. Yes.
it really does. Um, So you talk in the article about administrators in particular. And as a former teacher and administrator myself, I can say, yes, administrators often get in these positions because they're very good at scheduling, testing, personnel. They're not necessarily up on student support services and how to think about that. So tell us more about that. How to administer, what are the challenges and opportunities for administrators to make the pieces fit?
So, it really comes back to making sure I believe administration is it'll only work if it's like a true team effort. And that's can get very complicated, right? Like because all administrators have very strong personalities for the
Yes.
most part, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
it's not always easy to form and keep a good team. But without, well, it's almost like the puzzle. Like if you don't have all those varying pieces and personalities and strengths coming together, it's very hard to make like a school or a district work well. So I feel that you have to have one person in there who supervises a student support population or
Mhm.
staff population,
Okay.
who can advocate for them. And although they'll be often misunderstood, which I totally understand because it's often me, they have
Yeah.
to insert themselves into that world, you know,
Yes.
whether people like it or not, because without them, they're gonna stick to just the data and the machinery of it all and the robotics and the, you know, the cleanliness and the numbers and that's it.
Yeah.
And then we don't often take, you know, the social emotional into account. We don't often take how kids feel, how parents feel, how people feel, you know, how the community as a whole feels about the issues that are, you know, uh, the school's a microcosm of it, right? So how
Right.
those things play out in the school. You know, they want to just say, well, that's just how it is. Often I hear a lot of people say, well, it's a shame. Okay, well, it's a shame, but our job is, we're here to work with, like, our job is to fix it. Like,
Yes.
whether we like it or not, whether it's a challenge or not, because no one said we're gonna solve it all right away. Um, we can't just say it's a shame. It's a shame if we don't do something about it, because that's our job. So,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
So I feel like the student support services, it's like they're the you know, the counselors, the deans, the nurses, the
Mm.
secretaries, the social worker, like they're all child study team. They're all working with the students, but then when you have to have an administrator who also represents them. And they, it's not easy, but
No,
it's definitely needed because often the vice principals, the principals, the superintendent, they really don't know what
they
student
don't.
support is. Some of them have had those positions, but
Mhm.
most of them haven't. Most of them have been teachers or have been other faculty members. So,
Right. And it seems to me, and now I'm speaking as someone who's no longer in public ed, so I guess I have the luxury of just spouting this off. But it seems to me if your administration is modeling this by providing for the social emotional needs of staff and being sensitive because there was a lot of trauma during the pandemic for staff,
hmm,
um, then it's easier to create that culture where administration and staff, I'm talking instructional staff, plus, of course, student support services, can meet those SEL needs of kids.
yes,
But if you have if there's any part of any of those pieces are missing in the puzzle, then, maybe staff is struggling trying to meet their own
correct.
personal wellness and mental health needs. Makes it harder for them then to turn around and look at a family in crisis or a student that has unique needs and feel like they have the internal resources to meet
Yeah.
those challenges. Is there a cross section between student support services and support services for staff or
Absolutely. I would definitely say, you know, and I'm a big advocate for, although my current district doesn't have it, employee
Mhm.
assistance programs and things of
Yes,
that nature, because
yes,
we don't think they're important, but they're so important. And I feel like, you know, a lot of times the staff is just expected to figure it out or lean on one another. But, you know, that's when that's another, like, almost like disrespect to the support staff world, because it's like there's specific trainings and specific
yeah,
therapies and specific licenses that go along with all of these fields. And so you can't
right.
just lean on one another for
No,
everything that you go through. Like, that's
right,
just not, it's not going to work. And you're also
no,
colleagues,
right.
right? So, and then there's, you know, there's power differentials and things like that that you have to
There are,
consider too, and privacy and confidentiality, like
yes,
all these things that the kids go through, we also as adults go through. And unless you have administrators who've kind of gone through that and built their spirit up where they're able to manage that in their buildings or their districts, they're really not going to understand. They're just going to say, it's a shame. Okay, can you figure,
right,
you know, can you talk to your friends or can you go out for a drink? Or it's
right.
just not the answer. So it's almost
It's not,
like you have to build, like, employee assistance programs, things like that are, they're wonderful because they are something that's just for that, right? So
right,
that the staff has that opportunity to take care of their mental health and of everything else, just like they take care of their health in other ways, right? Like, just
right.
as importantly. um you know, oftentimes it's like they're like, well, you have insurance, you can go to, some one of your, find a practice and do whatever. But having that within your employment almost shows how important this is for you to
Yes.
do well and be well. Like if you're well, you'll do well too. So
Yes.
it's also a sign, and one of those things when people are looking for jobs, I almost want to tell them that's something you want to like think about. Like, are they going to support you mental health wise as well?
Cool. That's really good advice. One of the phrases you use in the article that I absolutely love is social instruction, the rise of wisdom in a child.
Hmm.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that comes a lot with my experience. Just, like I'm Indian and my family is
Hmm.
Indian, right? So
Yep.
just like knowing a little more about like schools in India and then like
Mhm.
I'm very interested in spirituality and stuff and learning about different spirituality systems and beliefs.
Yes.
I just feel like, as I look at schools in different countries and think about experiences that my friends, my fellow educators have had, I
Yeah.
just feel like we often neglect that in this country because we're so focused on all these others. And we want to compete with all
Right.
these other countries, but then we don't always practice what they practice, right? So,
It's true.
a lot of them spend time on confidence and pride in themselves, in their
Yes.
nation, in their beliefs, and
Yes.
like not putting religion into it, but just that sense of self and that
Yeah.
centering of who they are. Like there,
Right.
other places practice that. And I
Yes.
feel like that carries you through the instruction, right? It
Right.
carries you to success. And if we
Hmm.
spend a little bit more time on like the child, that's
Yes.
really extremely important. And like the whole child mentality, the social emotional learning, it's not
Yes.
this side thing, side project that if we have time for, we'll
No.
do one period of it a week or something.
Right.
It's
Right.
something that has to be integrated into your daily practices. And it doesn't have to be the teachers. That's where the support staff can help. Like the teachers don't have to do it all. But whoever's in charge of running the whole show has to make sure that that time is allowed, right? Because it's just so important for children to feel good, to do good.
It is. And I think society is telling us, get on my soapbox for a quick minute. We're still so in the old industrial model of education and trying to move them along through the grades and the instructional goals. But families and children are telling us, no, 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 this interpersonal piece, this wellness and mental health piece, we need this and we need it through our schools. And
Hmm.
so I think we're getting the message, but as an institution, it's slow changing. It's not, yeah,
Yes. I don't think people feel it close enough until something happens to them or their own
yeah,
close loved ones. Like they don't, I would never, God forbid anyone ever has to experience that. But
right.
sometimes I think the people who have get it more, like they understand the
Yes,
importance of it. And it's almost like, you're doing yourself a favor by allowing student support services to do what they're supposed to do because
right.
it will help you meet your goals. Like if you
Yes,
want to solve absenteeism and you want to raise your graduation rate, the kids have to feel like they want to be in school. They have to feel
exactly.
like they're supported. They want to feel like people are interested in the things they're interested in, right? Like
Yes,
that you're building rapport, not just with them, but you're facilitating their relationships with one another. All of that is part of this. And there's people that are specially trained to do different things, whether
yes,
it's mentoring or peer leadership or restorative practices, like all these
yes,
different things I try to infuse into my school, although sometimes there's resistance, right? Because not everybody gets it,
exactly.
but I'm like, just do this and be patient with the process because it's not gonna work in a year. But like
No,
give it a whole 2, 3 years or 3, 4 years, and you'll see that it does affect your rates. Like because
exactly.
people you won't have to force people to come to school or give them external incentives. They're
Right,
just gonna want to come because it feels good. So they'll just come. So, but you
exactly.
have to build that culture. And I also think we want everything right away, like the
Yeah,
students sometimes. So it's like no one wants to wait. Like it's not a 1 year goal. It's a
no,
multi-year process. So
it
you might
really
have to
is.
give it a whole freshman to senior year before you
Yes,
actually see some sort of change happen.
so true.
So it
It's,
just takes time.
it does. Another powerful phrase you use is the gravitational pull of relationships, and you made me think of
Mhm.
that as you were just talking.
Yes.
To that point, and I know in the article you were referencing relationships with students, but you also talk about professional learning communities and building networks of support.
Yes.
What can that look like when you're in student support services and you're working towards being more part of the big picture, but you're not there yet? How can PLCs help?
So I think PLCs, it's something that, and I'll often tell my counselors this, because one of the things that school counselors often face is people just give them stuff to do because they think they're doing nothing or don't know what they're supposed to do, right? So
Right.
they give them all these menial tasks and tasks that, others can do that are more
Right.
equipped to do it.
Right.
Which takes away from what they're
Hmm.
supposed to be doing, which
Hmm.
is school counseling and SEL and post-secondary planning and whatnot, all of that great,
Yes.
wonderful stuff.
Right.
Um, and tends to happen is that with PLCs, it's almost like I tell my counselors, like, you have to build your schedule because if you don't, other people are going to build it for you. Like, you have to just have it and say, this is what I'm doing today, and then let other people try to interrupt or disrupt it, but don't leave it blank and assume people
Right.
know what you're doing. Like, market what you're doing so that
Yeah.
they know what you do, right? So they don't
Right.
try to interfere with it.
Right.
And along those same lines with PLCs, it's like you have a scheduled time, and you're adding the importance of the instructional teacher PLCs and our social
Mhm.
studies PLC and our science PLC. Well, this
Right.
is our counseling PLC. This is
Yes.
just as important, if
Hmm.
not more, at certain times as the departmental PLCs that are happening
Hmm.
regularly. So it's built in time for things that we need to address in our school community. And it also integrates us back into the school community because often,
Yes.
we're pushed aside as people advisors or guidance departments and,
Yeah.
that data entry people and that's it.
Right.
And we're the people that do testing, and we're the people that schedule classes. But how does that work with everything else? And when you
Right.
have PLCs and you're able to, which is something I want to do more of, when you're able to actually have an agenda and
Hmm.
talk about, I believe I talked about bullying in the article, and have something that
Yes.
really does affect the whole school, then people
Yes.
start seeing your importance a little bit more, and slowly you build up to where you should be recognized as.
It makes sense. And is there also an aspect to this of building your PLCs beyond your school or district where you learn and acquire expertise from other people across the state or the region that you may not be able to get the chance to go see in person, building across buildings, but you can have this connection and an ongoing dialogue among professionals in student support services?
Absolutely. I think so. So most of that, I know, for at least for New Jersey and probably across other regions, like our school counselor associations or social workers associations, anything
Yeah.
that goes national, I think those are the best avenues for it right now. Although they're not in the same framework as PLCs, but they are some sort of articulation opportunities, right? Where people are able to network and talk about some of these things through designated workshops and debriefings and things of that nature. But
Yes.
I feel like it's never quite enough, right? And I don't think
No.
people make the connections they absolutely need. Like, they're still kind of working on their own. And, and a lot of people, as I had said in the article, even with those PD opportunities, like, people don't always take them because they feel like they're
Right.
neglecting their work when they go or
Right.
try to go. And, you
Yes.
know, that's why I feel like some of that does have to come from higher up, where it's like, you have to go. Like, this
Right.
is part of your evaluation. Like, you have to go to one thing per
Right.
year
Yeah.
and network with people and just learn of new strategies related to, your current caseload right now, or whatnot. It has to almost be
Mhm.
like a mandate,
Yes.
because otherwise, if it's not a mandate, people feel fearful to just really do it, even though they know it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Just very ironic.
It is. It really is.
Thank
It's an amazing article. I can't thank you enough for elevating it, and
you.
especially in times like this, we're just having a really hard time in public education right now, and such a timely reminder of what a resource student support services is. So thank
Yeah,
you for the
thank
article,
you.
but thank you also for the interview because now people can get to know you as well as I know you and
Yes,
understand
thank
the
you.
warmth and the passion behind the article. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I love the opportunity.